record and I'll go and let's see if I can share my slides. And of course, as anything I do, I kind of do this by practice. I want to use AI tools to even create things like this, right? So, these sessions, bi-weekly sessions, they're standalone topics. Of course, we can go deeper into this. For those who want to kind of do that with me, there's opportunity, obviously, to work with me, and I can mention that today as well, a little bit on how we can do that. But the purpose of our session here really is about kind of AI for market research. Like for most of us, whether we're a coach, whether we're, like in Tom's case, who's just joined kind of media research, we're using these tools to make things uh, quicker for us, right? So, and we get these insights. So I have put on entrepreneurs because most of the people here I know that I've either, whether we're coaches, whether we're selling products, we are kind of in this space where we're using it to serve our clients. And so I've noticed more and more as we're doing that, that we want some of this, whether it's looking at qualitative research where we've got surveys, we've done this previously, but today we'll be looking more at kind of some of those tools, how we may use some of the ones you've already used. So I'll touch on those in a moment. But first and foremost, I'm going to give you a two-step process when we're looking at research. Okay, so what I found helpful kind of is thinking about using AI to actually help me clarify about the kind of research I'm going to be doing. So step one, okay, so I'll show you this in how I did this with Notebook LM in a moment. And then I'll also show you kind of another tool, but the idea is not to kind of get carried away with the various tools that are available but kind of really hone in on what that, kind of research would look like. So, for most of us, if we're looking at these steps, so it's looking at kind of whether it's a product or we're looking at sort of targeting customer, or maybe it's a niche. I know, Liza, you're looking at kind of selling or perhaps even exploring products in the space of sports products, if that's my understanding. So maybe you can say more about that later on. Now, by all means, there's two examples that I've just put two tools here. However, there are so many other ones that we can use. So what I tend to do in step one is actually, if I've got a particular area of research I'm going to be looking at, I may use a tool like GPT-4. I may even kind of, and then once I've got kind of, and I'll show you this in more detail, kind of what I'm referring to here. And then I will say, look, I'm going to be researching about my target market or whatever that space might be. And I'll go into this a little bit more. And what questions can I ask to clarify or get clear with my research? And I'll go through these steps. So we may use one particular tool, AI tool, to get sort of broader insights and then use another tool to actually do the research. So we're kind of almost using a two-step process, which means that we're clarifying what it is, right, in the first instance and using the other. And I'll show you an example in a moment. Um, as we go through these slides. So I'm going to go through this through step process. So the second focus would be and plan. So let me come back to this before I go into, hi there, Tom, really good to see you. So hi, Ivan. We've got Wenka on as well. Lovely to see you on. So what I tend to find, okay, so let me show you an example what I mean by this. So if any of you have most of you looked at Notebook LM? I just want to double check that you've done that. Is anyone not familiar with Notebook LM? Okay, Jill, you're not familiar with it. Thank you for that. So, Tom, you've not used it. Kathy, have you used Notebook LM?
I have not.
Okay. I will show you. Some of you may have used it already, so I'm gonna show you what I would do. Okay. So, if I'm doing any kind of form of research, okay, I'll just go through this in a way. So my vision would be to get an understanding of kind of what kind of sports products. I was thinking of Liza when I was looking at this. What kind of sports products are are my kind of, my clients. We're looking at sort of their fears, we're looking at frustrations, aspirations, and I really want to kind of massage that in. So, for example, if you have been using GPT, it will already start understanding your behavior. And we talked about this last time because it's picking up how we're engaging with it. And so it's kind of all it's understanding. Of course, we can personalize it in the GPT environment. You've got that. We've done this together for those of you who haven't, but we can definitely do that. But what we want to do, it kind of understands who our client may be. Now, in Liza's case, she may be serving several types of clients. You may have an agency where you've got different kind of niches within that, right? So you may not just have one particular person you're serving, you may have different individuals that you're serving. So when that's the case, how do we then narrow down? Like, because it's picking up all the other kind of behaviors, say you've been serving other people, we can turn the memory off first and foremost if you want to do that. But what we want to do is we want to go into the model and ask various questions. So I'm going to give you a two-step process, right? And I will give you examples as well, because I know this seems a little bit conceptual, a little bit kind of like, oh, what's she talking about here? And then what I would do is I would use something like Notebook LM. Let me see if I've got Notebook LM already showing up on here. Let me just do one thing. I might have to do something here. Let me see if this is showing up. So what I found, Jill, you haven't used this, and I think Kathy, you haven't used Notebook LM. So what I would tend to do, let me just kind of go into what this looks like. So Notebook LM is a project Google. So it's kind of the Google Notebook LM, Google.com. Even if you just Google it, you'll get it. You just sign up. Signed up with my um, Google account, and then it's, by the way, it's free. Okay, so I always like to kind of mention some of the things that are available that we can access. Okay. And what I might do is, we know for those people who have kind of been in this space will have seen that, you would upload a document. So, Jill, happy to kind of show you how to do this a little bit more. But what I then did, we have different things we can do. We can have kind of so some of you may have heard these podcasts that are, that we were hearing a lot more of, and it would load with a conversation. So if I load this, it might take a few moments, okay? But you'll hear kind of two podcasters talking about this research. But that's not kind of what I'm like going to be going into a little bit more. But I'll play for a few seconds and you'll see.
Deep dive.
You'll
Sometimes when you're researching something important, it feels like you're just drowning in information.
Absolutely. It's easy to get lost.
Well, today we're looking at a really smart way to use AI, actually, to kind of cut through that chaos. Our sources lay out this two-phase model. It's designed not just to find info, but to really optimize how we research and pull out those key leadership insights.
That's right. Think of it as a structured approach, almost like a shortcut to becoming truly well-informed, especially if the goal is making strategic decisions.
Right, decisions based on solid research.
Exactly. We're talking about a much more efficient, more targeted way to get to the core of what you really need to know.
Okay, I won't play all of it, but you get sort of what I did in this instance. Okay, so the two stage process, which what I did was I uploaded the text. Okay, I just gave this text, then I went in and customized it, and I can kind of go through that if that would help. But what I really wanted to show you, and most of you who've been here before with me may not have used, one of the things that I find really helpful is using something like this. So, what I tend to do, so my kind of little intro at the beginning was like, so my two-step process, what it gave me was this kind of flow, right? So I would have kind of an intro, and what it does, it kind of expands out, which I find really helpful. So if I'm doing any type of research, then I might look at, okay, the structure uses, AI uses, right? But if it goes back, it will give me a little bit more on what that looks like. So it's a little bit blurred. It's a little bit faint on mine. I don't know if that's coming through on yours, but the idea behind this is if I'm working in this space and I want to use a mind map, okay, I find having something like this is really helpful. And I'm going to go through the two-step process as well. So these mind maps, if you haven't used the mind maps, are really helpful. And like I said, it's not as clear on my screen, but it might just be that kind of I need to amend this. But the idea behind this, if I go back to this and then I go back to I've got different things I can do, study guide. But what I really like with this kind of process of the mind map, which we've got the two-step process, is this. This is the thing, right? So whatever you're researching, that objective of the research, define what the actual research is, right? So my kind of thing of like what is it that we're going to be doing? Um, so identify key targets for yourself. So depending on what sort of research you're doing, and you may define the targets and then he starts giving me a little bit more. Now this is taking me, so in that mind map is fantastic, but what it's looking at, I don't know if you can see this clearly on your screen. I'll make it a bit bigger. So what I looked at was I wanted to look at more in this phase one. I wanted to really look at the objective of this phase, which was to define what I need to be researching. So the key informational targets were one, fears, right? Frustrations, needs, and aspirations. So for us business owners, those are the things we're wanting to look into, right? So what I would then do is these targets are identified in relation to target audience, specify business objective. So what is the process? The process involves participants, suitable AI model. So for us as users of the model, for whatever model you're using, so these are just some examples of some of the models that I tend to use. Some of you may already be using this, like GPT-4. The other model, which I'll show you as well if we get time, is looking at Perplexity, Croc. So this is one also that I find is super great. I mean, I find this one I've used more recently and has got. I mean, I kind of go between various models or Gemini, Claude. Now, in the first instance, what you want to be doing, if you're saying, well, there's too many models, well, why do I want to jump between one and the other? You may not do that. But what you might do is in the first instance is ask it the questions. So you may use one model to ask the questions about your target audience. So, what are their fears? What are their frustrations, needs, aspirations? What are the questions I can ask to get the best from an AI model so it can research and go away and do the research and provide me the best outcomes. And then I might feed those actual questions into a model like Perplexity, because Perplexity AI is one for research and it does the thing that that's what its job is, right? However, the new kind of, if you look at the latest versions of GPT-4, you're going to find that it does a lot of the deep research too, which I'll show you in a moment. And of course, some of you may already be using Gemini and Claude. So all of these models, all of these are free. And if you want to then take the step up to another kind of, the paid version, that's when you've obviously tested these out in the first instance. So that would be one of my first kind of suggestions for anyone who's starting out. Where we've been focusing a lot more is in the GPT-4 environment. And like I said, they are now getting very smart. So you will find, so whatever the research might be, and you're looking at kind of some of the fears, you might be going into these areas. Those are the kind of things that I definitely want to know. So if I want to kind of mark it out to my audience, these are the things that I will be looking at. Okay. So this output focuses on these areas. Okay. And then we go into phase two. So what I do is use that information and then feed that back into the model to look at the next phase. And like I said, I'll show you a little bit more on what that might look like there. But before I go on to this, I think I've got some questions which I'll answer if people have got that. So, are these real people or these podcast AI generated? Jill, these are AI generated. Yeah, great question. So so if I'm, yeah, so these are AI generated. What I find is we're putting our own content in. So the two podcasters now, they've got the same voice. Now they I know these things will change. And they're always the same voice, right? So they've become quite famous if you've heard any of the kind of podcasts out there. But you get like briefing notes. I've used it for briefing notes, and I've used it for study guides as well, because they kind of use the information you feed. Slightly different to say GPT, because it's actually using the information you're uploading in there. And so it's pulling on that information to kind of utilize to create the podcast. And then you can even ask it to maybe go through some steps, and I can show you if that's something you're interested in. But Notebook LM is free. It is a free version. So I don't know if you've used it, Tom, or if anyone else here has used it. I know Ivan, you will have used it. What have you used it for, Ivan? Have you used it when you've done some research and fed some of your research in there?
I've used it for two things really. One is trying to get a voice and a narrative for once you actually research, let's say, a client type, um, and you have an existing client and you're trying to create a piece for them to use, let's say in their marketing or something. I've used it for that to create an outline. It's a pity they don't have English speaking or English accent with the two people talking, because that would actually be just awesome. Or maybe they even have a South African one. Who knows? We could really rock the boat here. But the other thing that I find it quite useful for is if you've got a big document and you're just looking for an overview
Yeah.
or just some headlines, but more than a summary. I find Notebook LM quite useful in that respect.
Absolutely, yes, it does more than that. Like you said, it more than just kind of it provides an outline, but actually you can take those voices and you can upload them, and you can actually add different accents. There is a way
Okay.
to
Oh,
do.
that'd be cool.
Yeah,
But I also used it. I mean, I've written a book on networking and stuff like that. So I uploaded that and let them talk and come out with what did you call it now? Not a transcript, but the thing that they would be talking about. Their notes.
which uh not
The two people talking, they talk about it, and you can actually create almost like a transcript of that conversation.
okay. So pull that converse exactly, and then you've got that, right? So you've got the kind of script there, and
Yeah,
use
because they
that.
pull out bits out of the book which you may not have considered, and I find that quite useful, just as a different perspective.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And when you've got a book, you can actually did you upload the whole book?
Yes, I did. It wasn't a very thick book.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, it's good to upload the whole book. And actually there's other things we could do that when you're uploading your book. You can look at the style, and you can look at the stylistic features. That might be a different model we might go and look into in that instance. So the I suppose the focus really is that the key thing is to know what it is that we're going to be looking at when we're doing the research. So step one is, what is the focus of our research? That's definitely has to be the thing. And so rather than coming up with your own answers, ask the AI model to actually give you the questions that will help inform your research. So if we can do something like that, then we can use those questions and then feed it back into the model to then go and do the research. So the two phases, kind of the first one, and you can use different models to then do the deep research, because you may use a cheaper model. When I say cheaper model, is not you're not using, and then you can feed it into more of the kind of say the research where it may need a little bit more of those tokens, which we talked about before, and then we can ask it to go and do the research. And then once we got the output from the research, then that's kind of what we'll be thinking, that will basically inform the research. You can also do that the same thing with the outputs, you've got the questions, you can do the same with AI, Perplexity AI, and do the same with deep research in ChatGPT and actually get quite a good, a solid foundation of a research, synthesizing that and looking at kind of way moving forward.
Wow, that would have been super helpful last week because I had to sit on a panel for investment into Zambia, the Zambian embassy, and I used some of the research, but I used ChatGPT. What you're talking about, yeah, would have been super helpful.
Fantastic. Yes, yeah. And I think we've got, Jay, but we seem to be in early phase where humans are in the middle where between agentic work streams. Eventually, agents will work between agents. Humans will be out of the cognitive loop because we'll slow it down. Yeah. I mean, this is what's happening. Absolutely. What we're seeing is if we want to be doing the research, and we're seeing this with a lot of the automation processes already where we're seeing the agentic feel more so with tools like N8N, like we're seeing that, right? So if you're familiar with that, and so make.com also has it. So we can kind of feed that in and we can get them agents to go and do the research. Then they provide us with the output. So once we know these steps, it will make it so much easier to kind of get the output. So it is a little bit like until we know ourselves as humans what we want, then we can feed that into the AI model. Tom, hi.
Yeah, hi. No, I've been enjoying this. I've just been in the gym. It's been a little crazy morning here, but I just had two thoughts to share. I don't know if either one will really fit in with what you're talking about. You can tell me, but I'm happy to see two of my colleagues from our Substack discussion group, JB and Robert here.
Yeah.
And I think JB and others have told me about how they use Notepad and tools like this to gather ideas. It's kind of like I saw a story about a novelist who's in her 80s, Ann Tyler, who's written many novels. She said she listens, she overhears little snippets of conversation, so she puts them, jots them down or whatever. So it's the AI version of jotting random ideas down. Usually, when I'm writing for Substack, I have something very squarely in mind. But for those of us who really want to say, well, I want to write every day, no matter what, uh, I've heard, again, this Substack coach I studied with for a while, Tim Denning, said, use tools like this to just gather all your material so then you can weave it together however you like, so it doesn't have to be like a formal white paper or something like that. It can just be a great way to organize random stray ideas. So there's that. And then for the two voice podcasts that you shared with us, I've only done this a couple times, and I've used 11 Labs. Is that something you did with Notebook, or how did you create that podcast?
Yeah, good question. And I love it that we've got these AI tools help serve different styles, right? Which I really kind of it plays to my kind of style of learning as well. So I really appreciate that where you're saying kind of, generate ideas where you're using these notes. 11 Labs wasn't this 11 Labs is different. And 11
Okay.
Labs you can upload your own voice and then or and they are kind of and that's the other thing to be mindful of because we want to be using our own voices and you have so there is that, right? So we've got to kind of make sure that you can just upload and say a minute or so, and then it will pick up your voice and then it will emulate that into, say, a script that you upload. So we're seeing
Yeah.
a lot more of
Uh,
these
uh,
people doing this at the moment.
yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. No, and I'll just throw this in. Last thought. I know we're not supposed to use, well, I shouldn't say we're not supposed to use AI. We can use it however we like, but it's certainly more than a party trick. But as I was exploring 11 Labs for the very first time, choosing the two voices and so on, I was visiting my 90-year-old mother-in-law at home in Florida, and my wife said, show her something cool with AI. So her the mother-in-law's mother 100 years ago came through Ellis Island. So I said, what was it like for Jewish immigrants coming through Ellis Island? And I gave her a couple nuggets that, the family was aware of from our own story or whatever, my mother-in-law's story, but it filled in so many details and it was fascinating. and it was amazing that it could be cranked out in like 3 minutes. It's just, I guess it was a party trick, but it was interesting.
That's fantastic. Absolutely. And there's so much we can do with that, like transcripts. I've done also uploaded transcripts and I've asked them to kind of pick out common themes, that type of thing as well, sort of common patterns within things that you may miss, a human may miss, as JV's saying, that we may not always see. And kind of do it that way. So the two-phase approach is really helpful. And I will share the slides with you, and I'll go through this in a way that it makes it easier. So when I was doing, and of course, as I'm like, looking at research and thinking about kind of some of the things that we can bring, I came across this one, which is research. It's called Rflow AI. And of course, I've looked at the free version of this, and it's doing the same two-step process. So framing the inquiry. So what I did was, kind of looking at, okay, what other tools are there out there? And so this one was giving me a bit more kind of framing the inquiry, whatever that might be in your research trajectory. What is that? And it just says, help one, the entrepreneur need to be clear on vision and translate to specific research objectives, vision initial. So in this instance, actually, I was thinking of you, Liza. Actually, research first discusses the entrepreneur's idea. What kind of sports products are they passionate about? Do they have a specific niche in mind, e.g., eco-friendly yoga gear, gear for extreme sports, affordable team uniforms, etc., and their business goals, initial market exploration. So we may use things like these AI models like GPT-4 and the prompt. So, being really clear on what that prompt is my client is considering launching an online store focused on, whatever that entrepreneur's initial idea may be, specialized cycling, accessories, etc. And what are the current market trends in this niche? What are the potential underserved customer segments? What are common challenges for new e-commerce entrants in this specific sports category? And what's typical customer fears, frustrations, needs, and aspirations when purchasing such items? I really like to kind of focus on those because that helps us think about kind of how we're going to be putting stuff out there. And then, the research analyzes the AI's output to identify potential opportunities, challenge areas needing deeper investigation. So then the researcher, being us, the initial AI findings with the entrepreneur will help them narrow down their focus and explore promising avenues highlighted by the AI. So we're using the AI to actually give us the questions that we then feed into an AI model to go and do the research. And that's kind of a way of like really honing in on because what do we ask it, and because they'll come up with a lot more, as JB was saying, that perhaps we'll kind of know. And again, draft the research brief as a roadmap, right? So these are some steps in when we're looking at this. And of course, we won't be able to go in this in great detail, but I'd love to hear some, like for some of you who may be looking at the research, and I'll show you what comes out when you ask it to go and do that in a model like GPT. So I find this really helpful because it's kind of asking. So this is kind of going into a little bit kind of initial steps for entrepreneur market research. So that was kind of what I was saying. Again, I like this approach where you've got this kind of mind map approach. It helps me understand personally. I like things like this, kind of like, okay, what am I doing in the first instance in my research methodology? What is that approach? These are kind of the areas that I might be considering: market understanding, competitive insights. And then I may go in this phase one, framing the inquiry, looking at these tools, what is the objective? And then phase two, deep research execution. So execute comprehensive research defined in the approved brief, which is obviously the one we've put here, generating actionable insights and strategic recommendations for the entrepreneur. With that in mind, we should have kind of a quick. So again, this particular tool is free. as well. Okay. But there is, and then if you upgrade and you want more kind of research components, then you can obviously go to the Pro. But, for the purpose of where we're going with it, so we want to kind of hone in a little bit more. Again, it's going into those different segments here: analysis output, collaborative niche refinement, key research questions for any of us who are looking at those particular research questions. And then, of course, we've got the actual prompt. Now, we want to have the actual prompt here, and then we can then use that to feed it into the model. Um, and again, finalizing the research brief, it goes into a little bit more. I quite like this way of organizing. Say, if I'm looking at kind of doing some research, this may be one avenue to explore when you're doing that. Kind of thinking about kind of our own research, like what is the thing we're going to be looking at, right? So rather than going avoid us going down the rabbit hole, okay, without knowing what it is that we want from what the outputs would be. I'll mention a little bit about another tool, and it's so not to kind of overcomplicate things, but what I find is I also like to test things. And this one, I'm sure, Tom, you may have seen this one that you may have been using, where I was looking at. So this particular one, so you may have come across this, right? So answer the public. Now, what I find with this is, so if I'm doing, so these are used for search optimization, that type of thing. But sometimes it helps me understand, what are some of the terms or what are some of the words that will help kind of refine my research. Now it hasn't given me much here, but for us, some of us who are looking at doing some research and perhaps wanting to get more clicks from the terms that we're inputting in terms of the search optimization, this is a great tool, Answer the Public. If you haven't explored this, I used it previously. Has anyone used that one? Tom, I suppose you've used that, right? You will have used it. Okay.
Yeah, totally used that before. It's one of those ones where you can get quite a lot of useful insight on like the free edition, and then obviously you can pay to get sort of a deeper level of information as well, which is quite useful for when you're doing those kind of like search engine analysis and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because if you want to go further, obviously the paid version is the one we need, right?
Yeah. You have to
Yeah.
have a real need for it though, because like any of these things, if you're only going to use it once, for like half an hour, it can probably be a little bit, too much to subscribe for a year. Well, I think most of them you just subscribe monthly though these days, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. And Kathy, I'll answer that question as well. It's like anything, like whatever we do, it doesn't make sense in paying for something that you're not going to use, right? Test it out. Any of these tools we talked about, test them out first instance. And then, if you're wanting to then pay for them, then you're finding that you're using them, then obviously kind of pay for these tools. And somebody said the other day, oh, I'm paying a lot for it. Well, actually, if you get good returns, then it's worth the investment. That's how I make any informed decisions. When you're first testing these things out, you may, if you did what I did a couple of years ago, I kind of got all the tools because I wanted to test all of them out, like 11 labs, everything, right? So it became, in a way, it was good because now I can now talk about them, like some of the pros, what they were good for, and they've evolved a lot. Like even HeyGen, 11 Labs, when I uploaded and tested them out a couple of years ago, they've come a long way even since then. I've then come out of those subscriptions and I pay for the ones that I use that help me kind of stay focused on what it is. Oh, okay, Jill. Yeah, we can definitely connect. Yeah, I'll reach out and we'll definitely connect and I can go through some of those things as well. It's great seeing you on, Jill. You're welcome. Speak to you soon. Tom, let me answer Kathy's question here. Kathy, that was ask the public.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome. And you can have a look at that and some of these you can get quite a lot of the terms. Like we said, find that helpful. But say if you're informing someone to go and do some research for search optimization, say it's a good sort of avenue as well. That it's not by all means not the only one. But Tom, thank you. Thanks, Tom. Yeah. Tom Stevens,
Yeah,
but Martin, yeah.
yeah, just had two quick ideas to throw in. As far as how we've used deep research in the past, I haven't used it a lot, but I have used it. One was for a proposal over the years. Often, if I meet with a PR client, can you create a proposal for me? Sometimes I get bogged down and never do it, which is terrible. But this really expedited the process. The one that I'm thinking of was a client who had invented kind of, I guess, basically an iPhone app that would help supplement, the 911 emergency telephone system, because they said, oh, there's some flaws with it. If there's ever an emergency, it could be a disaster. And so I just asked Deep Research to find examples from, various locations in the US where, the 911 system had failed or they couldn't get a connection or something like that. And the client loved it. It made for a very persuasive, part of my proposal, when they hired me. And then the other one is I've created a number of lead magnets over the years, little 6-page booklets or something like that. And I thought, well, I really want to appeal to authors. So can you give me examples of 10 authors who've gone from kind of obscurity to, making a big impact? I'd heard the story of, Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He started selling his self-published book in car washes in Texas, and of course went on to be, have a great impact. But I thought that might appeal to other authors who might want to, follow up, have a conversation with me and stuff like that. But deep research was a great way to find 10 interesting examples like that. So those are two ways that I've used it.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean that's fantastic because ultimately this is why we want to use AI tools. It's great gimmicks to have, but ultimately entrepreneurs, we want to monetize on these, like we want to use it so we can, reach more people, serve more people, and actually then, like you said, using it for a proposal, and then you got a contract through that, which is fantastic. So so the other ones, Eva, great to see you back on. Just yeah, just in terms of the I was actually gonna share 1 second. Let me see if this is the one I wanted to share. No, that's not the one I wanted to share. Let me just come out of this. And I want to kind of uh, show you what happens then when you go into the GPT environment as well. Because when you then go into the GPT environment, I think I've gone into let's see, because they're all looking a little bit. So what I find is if I've asked it to do some research, it will give me then the research and the links here. So whatever kind of research or things we're looking at, this is just an example, but it gave me kind of 20 to 50 sources. What I find with having a lot of these kind of research tools at hand, once we have those questions, then it comes up with these various links. So thinking deeply about customers, and it provides these. Now, when I go to something like, but like Perplexity is the other one. So some of you may have used Perplexity. If you haven't, then you may, this was something of actually a colleague or friend of mine has been working on. She's created this kind of snap tap zap overview, and we were just looking to see how she was performing on this, and she appeared on there. So we were just kind of doing a bit of a test a few days ago. But what it does, you can also look at how you're appearing on Perplexity and what's popping up, like are your podcasts popping up or YouTube channels, that type of thing, and what other sources are showing for yourself. But in terms of wanting to do research, so my go-to for research is Perplexity AI for these. So when I go through that sort of those steps, and I'll go back to the slides in a moment, but with the actual phase one, but then use the AI Perplexity model to look at that. I may even go to Claude because they've, their capabilities, and that tends to work. But I'd love to hear which ones are the ones that you're using at the moment? Which are the tools that people are using here for research? Is there any specific ones that you've been using? If you
So
can,
I've got pretty deep
yeah.
into Gemini. We use it at Salesforce where I sell software at. And so like that's kind of building gems on there to do deep research and not just like 10Ks and I want obviously all publicly available information, but because it's behind a corporate firewall, you can feed it first party data as well. And when you combine those two things together and then shape it into a prompt for, let's say, tell me which of these roles will work in a CRM and which will work in Slack channels,
Mm.
output is incredible because not only are you gathering that information, but you're starting to focus it for a specific purpose and goal. And I think that that's kind of like the second step where I'm hoping you're going to go after this one.
Yeah, beautiful. That is fantastic. Absolutely. Kind of really kind of more than just, looking at the research, but really synthesizing and bringing it, weaving it together because it allows us to drive it. Because what I find, any of these tools, it kind of steers us away. So more we want is to kind of drive the tool as best that we can with our own, because of course, we can have agentic tools once we have these processes, but the key thing is that once we've got that oversight, like, no, 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 you need to go this direction. This is kind of, make sure that once we kind of go through those phases, and I will go back to my slide, but thank you for sharing that. So yeah, Ivan's shared GPT, Notebook LM, Perplexity, Gemini, Napkin AI. Yep, the ones that you're using currently. These are the ones. Brilliant. So for writing. That's great. Have you, JB, you obviously feeding in because you understand your behavior. Have you created kind of stylistic tone, voice, cadence, that type of thing, kind of understands kind of you?
Yeah, through GPT-4, I definitely have because I used it for a lot of modeling for fiction and for any of the nonfiction books that I'm writing. So it's gotten to know me pretty well over time, and it also knows the nuances between my professional career and my like artistic career. So it's a really interesting tool and almost sidekick to have. Look, the one thing AI will never be able to do, at least in our lifetime, I think, is mimic human emotional intelligence. Like that, it can probably mimic it, but it can't create it. I think our job as technologists is to insert that emotional intelligence at every level of prompting until we have to give up and just let it run on its own. So like we're kind of doing a public service here in many ways.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, because he will never have had the experiences that we have, right? He will never have had lived the experiences and lived the life that we've lived and everything that comes with that because, we just so more of that human touch, human centric approach. Robert, what about yourself? Hi, nice to meet you.
Hey, hey, yeah, nice to meet you guys. I just wanted to add briefly that since Google made their I/O announcements a couple of weeks ago, I would cross-compare Perplexity against Google's AI mode. And the reason I would do that is Perplexity doesn't use Google's search API to come up with all of the results. They built their own crawler. So and it is obviously very, very, very good. But I have a feeling that the slight advantage Google now has by using an AI mode into their search is they have indexed the internet. So they have a completely different data set of how to present these answers. And they have been curating what a good answer and a bad answer is since 1999. So just a good way to cross compare. And then the other thing I would say on JB's and what you just mentioned is AI will take over all the bad habits you have because you are sort of its teacher. And AI is like an intern that doesn't sleep. That's the best way I would look at it too. And what you said with creativity is very true. All of the human elements have to originate from us. It will not make them. It will not create them. It will probably tell you that all your ideas are wonderful, because that's just kind of how it's made. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you for sharing that because we were in fact talking about perplexity and some of the outputs that it gives us, right? So, just to make sure we're triangulating and not kind of taking it from surface level. So thank you for that, Robert, because that is the case, right? check that are we, there's always these hidden biases. Are we actually ensuring that we're looking at the source itself rather than just taking the output? Because there's a lot of people just believing everything that's coming out of these tools. So yeah, so to kind of raise that, thank you for sharing. Eva, hi.
Hi. Well, I've been listening to all of this now, and I'm paying for the ChatGPT 4, so that's what I've been using most. The rest of it, I didn't just because it's overwhelming. I understand that some people that are in it, you guys kind of know where to go to, what to ask, which model, because you kind of get it. But I'm now sitting here listening and wondering, like, if I'm gonna go have like 4 tabs open and, compare, and then do the research and go down the rabbit hole, in the end, I'm not gonna get the work done. I'm gonna get even more overwhelmed because each of them is gonna give me like 3 better words and 5 better answers. So I think, like, how do we go about actually getting the job done without going too crazy? Because even one chat GPT can get me really deep down the rabbit hole. So how is the best way to think about this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what the thing that I would definitely do is when we have 4 tabs open, so many of us tend to have many tabs open, right? I would just look at, okay, I'm going to spend this amount of time. This is going to be my research hour or my deep work, and then look at what that is, because when I have these phases, I do go, okay, these are my questions, great, my general questions. Now I'm going to feed this in. What was the output? Okay, that was the output here. Now what's the output there? If I want to triangulate that, that means like see which ones. At that point, I close that and say, that's it. I bring them into one space. But you're absolutely right. Now, what's going to happen later on is we're moving in the direction of a agentic kind of approach where it will pick from different models. We'll have 5, which will pick the deep search, and it will do that for us without having to kind of go through this. We're moving in that direction anyway, where it will just kind of pick the best model to do the best kind of thing for us. And then we don't have to kind of know what, know. But even when we're creating these, or we're kind of asking someone to even when we're asking them to build these blocks, in other words, when we're automating the process, then we still want to inform the developer, whoever it is, to say, okay, these are the tools that have been serving for my research. Kind of just being aware of that make a difference, because they may have outputs that don't, I mean, they may know that, but then, so I would just give myself time. It's like anything, because we could be on ChatGPT for hours and hours. Like we could just be there for hours, but it's like saying, okay, enough is enough. What is my research? What have I got? My fears, frustrations. This is my output. This is what I'm looking for. And has it given me enough to kind of whatever it is, if you're putting a proposal out in Tom's case, or if you're writing for Substack, have I got enough here? Because any PhD, I've worked with a lot of people writing PhDs and doing research, market research, it never ends, right? The truth is it never really ends, right? So we've really got to have a timeline for ourselves and say, basta, that's it. Enough is enough, right? So that would be my take, unless someone else has got, what's that sort of, Ivan? What were you going to say? JB saying, right, pick one model, ride it like a wave, and keep the output assets. Next time, keep your similar function, pick up a
Yeah.
different model. That's a great point. Actually, yeah, pick
Mm.
one and seeing what it does, because you'll find GPT does it. And then once you feel confident, then go there. But, yeah, it's a good question.
I
Ivan.
stopped me from going down too many rabbit holes with my trusty little hourglass. Yeah. Because when the sand runs out, that's when I draw the line. Because as you say, you can keep going down the rabbit hole, boy, and the rabbit hole is deep, because it's got little nooks and crannies. So I found that hourglass. This one's 15 minutes, so you can get an hour one or 20 minutes or whatever. But I find it's like super, super helpful. Or you could use a timer on your phone, but that's what I do. Because I've spent too many hours going down rabbit holes, I have to tell you.
It's a great share.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
check the gray hair.
Great idea with the hourglass. JB saying the hourglass is more elegant than the phone, or you exactly where you get, where you got the Pomodoro, where you've got the time. That's it. I'm spending this time and that's it. I'm closing the book and I'm moving on. It's easy to do that. Sometimes we want to have that space to kind of explore. I call this my exploration hour. I'm going to test this out, and then this is gonna be my kind of roadmap. And this is why this two phase, and I'm gonna come on to the second phase as we go on. Yeah, so it's a brilliant question. So, okay, so yeah, so coming on to the second step, focus and plan. So, as we're kind of, once you've refined the niche, pinpoint promising avenues from your AI findings. So now that you've got those, and we're focusing on what the customer kind of motivation, fears, needs, and aspirations may be, we want to draft the research brief or proposal, whatever that outcome might be. And quick key questions for the research. Step 3, dive deep with AI. Initiate sort of look at the brief. So whether we're using GPT-4, the paid version as you're using, Eva, and address research questions. Go through those. And then have a look at the prompt example. And I'm going to give you a couple of those. In fact, I'll share some examples of prompts that might help you. So these are the ones that we've spoken about, giving you a couple of other examples there. But yeah, the one with ChatGPT. So I've used GPT. So if you're staying in the same environment, you might start with GPT and just stay in that environment, to stay in lane, and then go into the same lane, then feed it back into the GPT for the deep information gathering analysis. And then you may put it into creating a document. You might use something like what I've used here to create a document, Gamma.ai, for example, where you can create your document using that. So you've kind of phased it out. So what I always say, have these steps that work. So why this approach? AI kind of thinking about what the vision, the human expertise, vision, understanding, effective prompting, and ensure critical evaluation of whatever comes out of it. At the end of the day, JB mentioned this, we've all kind of seen this, that we're the experts, we know kind of who our clients and who some of those frustrations. We're going in deeper into the research and finding things we may not see. But nonetheless, we're the ones that kind of putting this information in, and it's understanding how we're showing up in this world. Rapid information retrieval, we've seen that with Notebook LM, pattern identification, or kind of, these summarizations. And just one of the things to bear in mind with some of the tools, what you'll notice is if you put something at the beginning of the prompt, it will have that bit at the top of the prompt at the end, and the middle bit gets a little bit, I would say, a little bit diluted. So just to kind of looking at the latency of like when we're looking at the output. So just be mindful of that when we are getting information. I could definitely go more into that. But results, has it given you relevant data? Look for that source. Where did it come from? Whatever this tool might be. And then the actionable strategy is how we're serving your clients. So, so going back into clear strategy, leveraging AI, guidance is key. And then just have those in whatever those that the strategy may be. And so if you have questions, you want to go into some of these areas and, just kind of look at, okay, this is what I'm doing. This is the research avenue. I'm still not sure what it is. Then, obviously we've got the time. We'll meet again in 2 weeks' time. But of course, you can ask questions. We've got about a minute or so, and I'm also mindful of everyone's time. But please, if you've got any specific questions you may have, when you're thinking about creating any prompts or anything like that, my big tip for everyone would be before you do anything with your AI model, what exactly do you want the AI? What's your interaction with the AI? How will the output help my business or your business? And what client problem am I trying to solve? Okay. And then what we can think about is for those who want to go into that and create prompts or even their own GPTs, we can look at using prompts that look at what I call system prompts or customized prompts that we can use, delineators, that type of thing within the prompt so that it understands your voice, etc. Any other questions? So Ivan has a question. JB, speak to you soon. Thanks, great to see you.
Sorry, I'm being a bit of a pain here. My question is this, we talk about prompts all the time and getting the prompt right and all the rest. And we were talking about rabbit holes, right? So the rabbit hole, maybe for another day, but just a topic. You have these, what do they call them? Prompt crafters. Or you can go and go to some website and say, help me create a bulletproof prompt for ABC, right? Or
Yes.
finding a niche for, or whatever it is. Two questions. One, is there one website that you could recommend? Piggybacking you here. And number two, is this a topic that we could cover at some other date?
Absolutely, we can definitely do that. And also how we're keeping our prompts so that we don't have to go to primary bases every time when we're creating a prompt, right? So we might do I know I won't keep you for too long, but we may do something like this where what I do is, and this gets a little bit technical, but I'm happy to kind of show you how. Yeah, great, Tom. I think Tom's gone as well, but that's okay. Tom Martin is here. But so what I might then do is things like I use this type of mode here. I use something like delimiters, right, to set the tone, and chevrons, right? So we see these chevrons are those kind of lines to indicate move forward and configuration within the GPT so it understands our voice. It gets a little bit like that's what we want to be doing, so it understands our voice, right? But yeah, we can definitely look at prompts that will help. I know it's taking us a little bit of a different avenue here, but anyone wanting to work with me, we can obviously we have an hour here, so we go through this quite quickly. Thanks, Robert. It's been great. And thank you for your shares as well. Head of the game. Nicely done. Speak to you soon, Robert. All right, take it easy. Okay, so yeah, so we definitely can do that. But it's a great suggestion. We could look at how we can keep those prompts that we're not having to, and do we have to go to GitHub? Not necessarily, right? Because that's the place where all the people kind of we see these prompts sitting there, right? How am I going to use them? What's that, so if I'm going to be using them for my work rather than going down that rabbit hole of places, right? Yeah, I hope you found it helpful. I know that we're kind of talked about research, and I mentioned a few of those tools there, and I hope you found it helpful in the sense that it's, something to take away and apply for your own research. Liza, has that been helpful? Eva, Wenka, great to have you on. Kathy, thank you. I saw your message. You're welcome. Great, Eva. Thank you for that. All right. So brilliant. Thank you. I'll see you soon. But yeah, we can focus on prompts. Maybe in 2 weeks, I can kind of come up with some prompts that can help you take it to the next level with your prompting. And we can all kind of, apply these. So we don't have to be, technicians. But, if you know people that would like to join, love to see them on. And anybody wanting to create their own customized GPTs, understand that and apply them. And then even monetize, because we want to be able to monetize those GPTs so that they can use them in their work. Then, of course, there's magic in that too, right? So great seeing you all. Speak to you soon. And I will see
Thanks so
you in a
much,
couple of
Bally.
weeks. You're welcome. Speak to you
Thank
soon.
you.
Bye for
Bye,
now.
everyone.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Bye now.